Remember when America fell in love with a family of monsters living in a crooked suburban mansion? The Munsters ran on CBS from 1964 to 1966, turning Frankenstein dads, vampire moms, and polite little werewolf kids into the most lovable family on television. Fred Gwynne played Herman, Yvonne De Carlo played Lily, Al Lewis was Grandpa, Butch Patrick was Eddie, and Marilyn was played by Beverly Owen, and later Pat Priest, making the Munsters feel like the weirdest neighbors on the block. But behind the laugh track and cobweb-covered chandeliers was a full-blown circus. Rival networks, scrap pilots, illegal car parts, and a leading man who nearly passed out in every scene. Today we're going to count down 15 weird facts about the Munsters that you probably never knew. We'll stick around for number 1 as well, because it explains why this short-lived sitcom never really went away. But before we start, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss a single trip back to one of America's kookiest families. All right, let's head to Mockingbird Lane. Number 15, the monster battle that took over 1964. In September of 1964, 2 of the strangest sitcoms ever made hit the airwaves just 6 days apart. The Addams Family on ABC, the Munsters on CBS. 2 spooky families, 2 networks, and 1 cage match that nobody asked for. And both of them knew exactly what the other was doing. The 2 shows were developed in parallel throughout 1963 and 64, and neither side blinked. They just kept building their gothic sitcoms and trusted that the audience was big enough for both. Turns out, they were right. Frankenstein's monster flipping pancakes on one channel, Gomez Addams kissing his way up Morticia's arm on the other. Audiences didn't pick one, they just watched both. When the Nielsen numbers landed, there was a clear winner, though. The Munsters finished the season at number 18, and the Addams Family came in at number 23. The Munsters also squeezed out more episodes, 70 to 64. It's a close race, but not a tie. And the Munsters had a secret weapon that the Addams Family couldn't match: Universal Studios. That meant legal access to the classic monster looks, meaning Frankenstein, Dracula, the Wolfman. Audiences didn't need a character Bible. They'd been watching these faces in theaters for decades. In 1964, America, they didn't just choose monsters, it chose the monsters that it already knew. Number 14, the lost color version that you were never supposed to see. Before 1313 Mockingbird Lane became TV's most famous black and white mansion, Universal shot a full-color test pilot called My Fair Munster. And if you've ever seen it, well, it feels like an alternate universe. The house looked less gothic, less distressed, and not the condemned nightmare that we grew up loving. Lily didn't even exist yet. Herman's wife was Phoebe, played by Joan Marshall, sharper and more abrasive than the warm Lily that we'd eventually get. And Eddie? Oh, forget the sweet kid with the widow's peak. The original Eddie was way wilder, more full-on wolf boy than lovable sitcom kid. When CBS saw the pilot, they didn't scrap it. They just sent everyone back to the drawing board. Phoebe got dropped, reportedly because she looked too much like Morticia Addams. Eddie got recast, the tone got overhauled, and the show pivoted to black and white. The official line was that black and white was an artistic choice, a nod to the classic Universal horror films. Dramatic shadows, moody lighting. It sounded great in the press release, but unofficially, color was a bit expensive. Filming in color in 1964 cost significantly more per episode, and Universal wasn't in the mood to write that check. Here's the twist. The cost-cutting is exactly what made the show work. Gwynne's makeup looked better. The lighting genuinely felt spooky. The whole thing looked like a classic monster movie instead of guys sweating in costumes. Number 13, Herman wasn't gray. He was actually bright purple. Herman Munster's skin had that perfect corpse gray tone. Not too dark, not too pale, just unsettling enough to look undead without crossing into actual horror. Here's the thing, that gray wasn't gray at all. It was bright, fluorescent, borderline ridiculous violet. Yeah, welcome to one of the weirdest tricks in Hollywood. Makeup artists have been doing this since the silent era, painting actors in counterintuitive colors that photographed as something totally different on black and white film. Boris Karloff's Frankenstein in 1931 got coated in greenish-gray grease paint for the same reason. On screen, it read as deathly pale. Herman's team went a different route. They picked violet, a color that bounced studio lights in a way that translated into a perfect corpse gray on camera. There was just one catch. In real life, Fred Gwynne looked absolutely ridiculous. We're talking bright lavender, the kind of purple that makes you do a double take. On set, Herman didn't look like a terrifying monster. He looked like a 7-foot-tall great popsicle in a business suit. And here's the part that makes it even better. Every single day, Gwynne sat through a 3-hour makeup process just to become TV's most lovable ghoul. 3 hours for a color that nobody at home would ever actually see. Number 12, Herman and Grandpa were a package deal. Fred Gwynne and Al Lewis didn't audition for the Munsters. They got hired as a set. A year earlier, they'd been working the same Bronx precinct on a sitcom called Car 54, Where Are You? Gwynne was Officer Francis Muldoon, a tall, deadpan straight man, and Lewis was Officer Leo Schnauzer, the henpecked cop who could go from zero to volcano in about 2 seconds. The show only ran 2 seasons, but every time those two shared a scene, the chemistry was undeniable. So when Universal started building the Munsters in early 1964, Gwynne and Lewis were the 2 first names cast. As a pair, producers had watched them work the same squad room for 2 years on NBC and decided that they didn't need to audition anybody else for Herman and Grandpa. Everyone else came after. Phoebe got cast and then recast, Eddie got recast, Marilyn got swapped mid-season, and the whole show kept rebuilding itself around the 2 guys at the center. Number 11, the Marilyn swap that nobody noticed. Remember Marilyn, the so-called normal one? Well, even Marilyn had a secret. There were 2 of her. The original Marilyn was Beverly Owen, raised in Iowa and based in New York, and wanting nothing to do with Hollywood. She'd been locked into a studio contract, shipped across the country, and then dropped onto a sitcom about werewolves and vampires. Worse, she was engaged to a man back home, future Sesame Street producer Jon Stone, and by all accounts, miserable. Reportedly, she'd break down in tears between takes. Fred Gwynne and Al Lewis noticed. They petitioned the studio to release her, and some accounts claim the whole cast threatened to walk if Universal didn't let her go. After just 13 episodes, Owen got to go home. She married Jon Stone that same summer. And then enter Pat Priest. Same blonde hair, same sweet face, same general vibe. The opening credits got reshot, and the role moved forward like nothing had happened. Number 10, Grandpa was younger than his own daughter. Grandpa Munster felt roughly 600 years old. The raspy voice, the dusty lab coat, the way he shuffled around like he personally invented cobwebs. Off camera, the guy was in his early 40s. For decades, Al Lewis told interviewers that he was born in 1910. That would have made him a believable father to Lily. Convenient math. But one problem, records suggest that he was actually born in 1923. Social Security documents, the 1940 census, and his own son all point to the same year. Which means that the man playing Grandpa was 7 months younger than Yvonne De Carlo, the woman who was playing his daughter. Here's the breakdown. De Carlo, born September of 1922, Lewis, April 1923. Fred Gwynne, the big lumbering dad, Herman, was born in 1926. Herman was actually the baby of the 3 adults. So how did Lewis pull this off? Well, heavy prosthetic makeup built to hold up under unforgiving black and white lighting, a raspy voice cranked to 11, and a cackle that he'd clearly been waiting his whole career to use. Once you know the truth, the energy makes a bit of sense. Grandpa wasn't some old frail man creaking toward the grave. He was a guy in his early 40s going full cartoon character in vampire makeup. Number 9, even the bird was a superstar. Now, most 1960s sitcoms had a cute little cuckoo clock on the wall, something cheerful that would chirp on the hour and mind its own business. The Munsters had Charlie the Raven, and Charlie had opinions. Instead of a pleasant cuckoo, Charlie would pop out of that cuckoo clock on Mockingbird Lane and croak his legendary line, "Nevermore," the direct shout-out to Edgar Allan Poe's most famous poem, which meant the Munsters owned a timepiece with a better literature education than most people watching. Now, Charlie didn't stop there. He'd throw shade at Herman, he'd make sarcastic cracks at the family, get under Herman's skin until Herman would hurl something across the room at the clock. You haven't lived until you've seen a 7-foot Frankenstein try to win an argument with a puppet bird and lose somehow. The voice behind that Raven, none other than the great Mel Blanc, as in Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, Porky Pig, Barney Rubble, the most prolific voice actor in animation history. He's uncredited but unmistakable. When Blanc wasn't available, actor Bob Hastings would step in. Most of the time that bird popped out of the clock to insult Herman, you were listening to the man who helped shape Saturday mornings for a generation of kids. Number 8, the pet dragon that you almost never saw. Now, sitcom families always needed a pet to make the family complete. A dog, maybe a cat if they were feeling adventurous. But the Munsters kept a fire-breathing dragon under the staircase and named him Spot, the way that you name like a golden retriever or something. Here's the catch, though. You almost never actually saw him. Spot was the Bigfoot of Mockingbird Lane. A scaly tail wagging out from under the stairs, a burst of smoke, maybe a quick flash of a giant head, but then nothing. The reason was beautifully 1960s. Of course, building a full-body dragon would have cost a fortune that the show didn't have, so the prop department would get resourceful. Different accounts tell different stories. Some say Spot's head was lifted from an old monster movie prop and retrofitted with flame-throwing nostrils. Al Lewis said Fred Gwynne sketched the design himself, and the crew built it from scratch. Either way, what ended up under the staircase was a few feet of dragon, a fire hose, and just a whole lot of imagination. The genius part? Not showing the entire dragon made him feel bigger than he actually was. Every glimpse of a tail, every puff of smoke, it all made Spot seem 10 times more massive than the few feet of prop that actually existed. The Munsters treated him like a regular household pet. He'd get scolded for making messes, he'd run away when Herman yelled at him, chase the occasional car. He's just your average family dog who could accidentally incinerate the postman. Hey, quick pause. If you grew up loving the Munsters, hit that like button and let us know in the comments. Who was your favorite? Herman, Lily, Grandpa, or Eddie and his wolf boy Widow's Peak? And make sure that you're subscribed so you don't miss the next weird trip back through TV history. And while you're at it, don't forget to ring the bell. All right, let's check back in with our favorite Transylvanian family. Number 7, the monster car that was basically a rocket. Now, while other sitcom dads were piloting station wagons around the suburbs, Herman Munster was rolling up to work in an 18-foot custom hot rod that looked like it escaped from a haunted garage. Meet the Munster Coach. The thing wasn't built, it was just kind of stitched together. 3 Ford Model T's bodies welded onto a custom 133-inch frame, stretched into one of the strangest vehicles ever made for television. And it was built by a legend, Hollywood's go-to custom car guru, George Barris. Barris was given a jaw-dropping 21 days to turn raw scrap into a rolling showpiece. Now, most people can't assemble an IKEA bookshelf in 21 days, but Barris built a cultural landmark. Nothing about it was cheap. Hundreds of hours of hand-formed Gothic scrollwork, blood-red velvet interior, brass lantern headlights, a gloss black pearl paint job that popped on camera, even in black and white, and the final bill? $18,000 in 1964, or roughly $180,000 today. Now here's the kicker. It actually drove. Under that Gothic hood sat a real 289 Ford V8 with 10 chrome carburetors lined up like a row of piano keys. Not a wobbly prop being towed around the studio lot, but rather a functioning, street-terrifying custom hot rod. For every kid watching at home, the message was clear. Your dad had a Buick, Herman Munster, he drove a weaponized hearse. Number 6, Grandpa's Dragster was built from an actual coffin. Herman had the family hot rod, but Grandpa had something different entirely. A back alley coffin, a V8 engine, and absolutely no regard for logic. Meet the Dragula. The body wasn't a custom prop built in a workshop. It was a real, honest-to-God coffin, a fiberglass casket sourced from a funeral home in North Hollywood, which sounds simple enough, except according to the Barris team, California law at the time prohibited selling coffins without a death certificate. So the production team did what any resourceful Hollywood crew would do. Cash to the funeral director, and the coffin gets accidentally left outside after closing time. A couple hours later, the crew rolled up at midnight and loaded it into a truck like they were robbing a crypt. Somewhere between a sitcom and a heist movie, a car was born. The Dragula skipped the usual license plate. It had a marble tombstone mounted on the front, engraved with "Born 1367. Died?" ? Perfect clarity. But this wasn't a prop. It was a real functioning dragster. A 350 horsepower Ford Mustang V8, organ pipe exhausts that roared like something clawing out of a mausoleum, and Grandpa perched above the rear axle under a tiny plexiglass bubble like a gargoyle strapped to a rocket. Decades later, the legend only grew. It inspired a Rob Zombie song. An authentic version later sold at auction for 6 figures. It's not a bad return on a coffin and some fairly questionable paperwork. Number 5, the house that kept changing identity. Now, the Munster mansion felt like it was built for monsters. You had crooked tower, dead trees. It was a Gothic nightmare squatting in the middle of the suburbs. Except it wasn't built for monsters at all. The house first went up in the Universal backlot in 1946 for a forgotten romantic film called So Goes My Love. For years after, it sat on the lot as a generic mansion, redressed and shuffled into productions whenever somebody needed fancy house. Universal staff called it the Maxim House. No drama, no dead trees, no bats. But when the Munsters came along in 1964, Universal transformed the whole structure. A crooked chimney, a widow's walk, a bat-shaped weather vane. The whole place got smothered in dead foliage and fake decay. The goal now wasn't charming home, it was, this property should probably be condemned. And here's the twist. That same building still stands on the Universal backlot today. You've seen it, you just didn't know it was the same house. After the show ended, the spooky details came off in stages. Then, in 2005, desperate housewives moved in and pushed the rebuild further, tearing down the second floor entirely and building a cheerful new one in its place. During that show's first season, the production crew deliberately kept the house out of frame, because it was still a little too recognizable as the Munster Mansion. Number 4, the man who became a monster and paid for it. Now, on screen, Herman Munster was a lovable 7-foot goofball who could barely fit through a doorway. But off-screen, Fred Gwynne was the guy slowly dying inside the costume. Gwynne was already 6'5" without any help, but Herman had to be bigger, so they built him a full-body getup. Padding, makeup, and 5-inch asphalt spreader boots, totaling somewhere between 40 and 50 pounds. The boots alone were so rigid that they left him with ongoing back pain throughout the run of the show. Every step that Herman took was a negotiated settlement with gravity. Now add 1960s studio lighting, burning hot lamps blasting down on a suit that was trapping every degree of body heat with zero ventilation. Gwynne reportedly lost up to 10 pounds in a single month from sweating. He'd drink lemonade by the gallon just to stay upright. Between takes, the crew would poke a compressed air hose in through his collar and blow cold air into the costume. And here's the thing, none of it shows. On camera, Herman, always smiling, laughing, kind of bumbling around like an oversized toddler. You never once see the heat exhaustion. You just see a giant lovable monster dad having the time of his life. Number 3, the superhero that killed the Munsters. The Munsters didn't fade away quietly. It got beaten to death by a guy in a cape. Season 1 was a legitimate hit, finishing at number 18 in the Nielsen ratings. It picked up a Golden Globe nomination in 1965. By every reasonable metric, the Munsters, well, they were thriving. But then, in January of 1966, ABC launched Batman. Not the gritty modern version, but the original. The campy, neon-colored, pow, bang, zonk version that starred Adam West in a cowl and Burt Ward in green tights. It was bright, psychedelic color that exploded across American TV screens twice a week. Batman didn't just compete with the Munsters, it ambushed it. Batman aired 2-part stories every week. Wednesday was the setup, and Thursday was the cliffhanger resolution. The big payoff was the bigger audience. And the Munsters? Well, they aired Thursdays at 7:30, head-to-head with Batman's most watched episode of the week. The ratings collapse was brutal. The Munsters plummeted from number 18 to number 61 in a single season. Batman also wasn't the only problem. Every network was shifting to color, and Universal wouldn't pay the cost to upgrade the Munsters. So between collapsing ratings and black and white feeling outdated, CBS pulled the plug. The Addams Family didn't survive Batman either. It got pulled a month before the Munsters did. Number 2, Lily Munster took the job to pay hospital bills. When Universal offered Yvonne De Carlo a weekly sitcom about monsters in the suburbs, everyone expected her to say no, including her future co-stars. Fred Gwynne and Al Lewis reportedly marched straight to the producers and said, "She'll never fit in. She's a movie star." What they didn't know was why she said yes. 2 years earlier, her husband Bob Morgan, a Hollywood stuntman, had been doubling on How the West Was Won. He was resting on a flat car between takes when the chains holding the fake logs snapped. Morgan got crushed and run over. He did survive, but he lost his left leg. Then came the bills. MGM denied responsibility for the accident. The couple eventually filed a $1.4 million lawsuit against the studio. But in 1964, what De Carlo needed wasn't a court date, she needed a paycheck, every week, on time. The Munsters? Bingo, that's the paycheck. Once on set, the supposed diva threw herself in. Pies in the face, pratfalls and heels, dragon jokes. Al Lewis later admitted what he and Gwynne thought of her at first. We were wrong. The biggest movie star in the cast turned out to be the one who needed the show the most. And number 1, the TV show that never really ended. Here's the thing about the Munsters. For most of you watching this, the show never really felt like a 1960s sitcom. It felt like something that had always just kind of been there, part of the furniture of childhood. Something you'd flip past and stop on because you already knew every episode by heart. That wasn't an accident. That was a cable network called Nick at Nite. Now, when Nick at Nite launched on July 1st of 1985, it did something radical. Instead of dumping old reruns into empty time slots, it pitched itself as the first cable channel built around classic sitcoms. Self-aware promos, tongue-in-cheek branding, a presentation that said, hey, these shows matter and we know that you love them. Now, over the years, the Munsters became a fixture of the lineup. Late-night blocks, summer marathons, themed weeks, and the Munsters became one of its reliable weekly stops. Now here's the magic trick. The Munsters had only ever produced 70 episodes, but Nick at Nite kept looping them. Every few months, the series would restart. The same jokes would resurface, and the same scenes became familiar landmarks of childhood. So for a whole generation of kids that grew up in the 80s, it didn't feel like a short-lived show from a long-gone era. It felt like something that had always been on, something that would always be on. A 2-season black and white sitcom became Immortal on a cable channel dedicated to loving old shows exactly as they were. And there you have it, everyone. 15 weird facts about the Munsters. Some shows end when the credits roll, but the Munsters, they never did. What started as a short-lived CBS sitcom from 1964 to 1966 became something bigger, a show that kept coming back every time television needed a little more nostalgia. Which fact surprised you the most? Well, let us know in the comments, and make sure that you're subscribed so you don't miss any of our next nostalgic TV drops. Until next time, this is Remember When.